I think the scariest feeling in the world is being faced with losing your child and feeling like there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Little Doug was always a super healthy kid, as far as we knew. Very high energy. He definitely kept us on our toes since day one. 2 months after his 6th birthday, we took him to the ER thinking he had a bad stomach bug because he was throwing up, but he was throwing up yellow bile. I still remember standing in the ER when the doctor came in and told us, "Your son's heart is larger than an adult's, and we need to rush him to Children's Hospital." For the next 8 days, the doctors did everything they could to support little Doug's heart with medications, but his heart's ejection fraction was only at 12%, and it wasn't improving. So the doctors came in and they brought a little metal pump called an LVAD, left ventricular assist device. And they told us that they wanted to implant it into little Doug's heart. If we did this, it meant he would have a drive line coming out his left side that would connect to a computer that controls the pump and also to 2 battery packs. And he would have to have those 3 things strapped to his body from there on out. When they presented this to his dad and I, our first question was, if we do this, will there still be a chance that his heart can recover? And the doctor's answer was absolutely yes, absolutely. So we consented to the surgery, but open heart surgery was really hard on little Doug's weak heart. So when they put the left pump on the left side of his heart, it was too much for the right side of his heart to keep up. The right side of his heart was very weak and it was failing. And so they ended up having to put a second heart pump on the right side. But that heart pump was a huge external pump, and it was called an ECMO. 6 days after they put that pump on, it clotted off. And there was a short panic while they were trying to figure out what to do, and then they realized that the right side of his heart had recovered enough that it just took over. And so they took him back into surgery and they removed that right pump. Getting little Doug back on his feet after those surgeries was a really slow and difficult process. But the nurses and the physical therapists at the hospital were amazing. They did so many cool out-of-the-box things to motivate little Doug to move and to get him back on his feet, and they just really made the whole process a lot of fun for him. Gotta know where you're going, dude. As I mentioned before, prior to the surgery, when we asked if it would still be possible for little Doug's heart to recover, we were told absolutely yes. But immediately after the surgery, when we asked what does the road to recovery look like now, the doctors told us, well, there's actually less than 1% chance that his heart could recover. And they immediately started pushing us towards transplant. They also told us prior to the surgery that the LVAD they put on him would enable him to be able to go home. But after the surgery, they said, well, we've never actually sent a patient this young home on this type of device. It would be very dangerous and very high risk. but I just knew that if I could get little Doug home, he would do better. So, in true little Doug fashion, he busted through their limits, and 2 months after he was admitted to Children's Hospital, he walked out of there. Keep going, dude. You got this. Definitely leaving different than you came in. Little Doug is currently the youngest patient in the United States living at home on an LVAD. Once we got little Doug home, he did extremely well. And I started to notice that things that they said that he would struggle with, he didn't. And things that they said that he wouldn't be able to do, he was doing. I remember it was really fun whenever we would see family members or friends for the first time after being in Children's Hospital. When they would see little Doug for the first time, it was just so fun to watch their faces, because they always had like saucer eyes because little Doug was running around and laughing and giggling and basically bouncing off the walls, and they were just had this look of awe on their face, like, this is the kid with a heart problem? You know, they were all expecting, you know, a little kid to be sitting in the corner all lethargic and no energy, you know, and here he was. If it was even possible, it seemed like he had more energy after the LVAD than before, and that's really saying something, because he was super high energy before he got the LVAD. All of this gave us a lot of hope that little Doug's heart was actually recovering. But whenever we would bring this up to the doctors, they would just say, well, that's just the LVAD doing a good job, and they would go back to pushing us toward transplant. So while we were over here hoping for explant, that's what they call the surgery when a heart has recovered enough to function on its own and they remove the LVAD. So we were hoping for explant, and all the while our team was just only focusing on transplant. Over the next few months, I felt like we were stuck on a broken record, where we would say, what about recovery? And they would say, let's list them for transplant. And we would say, but what about recovery? And they would say, list them for transplant. And we would say, recovery, and they would say, transplant. And it just felt like we weren't getting anywhere. As soon as we got home from the hospital, I started doing my own research. And through that process, I discovered that recovery rates after VAD are indeed extremely low in the US. But I discovered that in other countries, they're actually much higher. In fact, pretty much every other country implanting LVADs has a higher recovery rate than we do here in the US. In the UK, their recovery rate is 12%. Poland is over 16%. And Germany actually has the highest recovery rate after VAD, and they're pushing around 30%. That's a far cry from the less than 1% chance that our doctors gave us. Why is that? Why are we so quick to jump to transplant in this country, especially considering the heart shortage that we are currently facing here? Every year, the gap widens between the number of people that need hearts and the number of hearts that are available. One of the reasons why we don't look for recovery here in the US is because the verbiage in the FDA approval for these devices says that they are approved as a bridge to transplant or a bridge to destination therapy. But it does not include the verbiage that says they are approved as a bridge to recovery. Another reason is, in this country, there's no detailed, standardized protocol for doctors on how to test for recovery or what to look for to know that recovery has happened. Now, these protocols do exist, but very few doctors know about them or have access to any type of training on them. This needs to change. Doctors and patients need to have access to this type of information. We need the FDA and our medical associations in this country to make this a priority. If we want to lessen the shortage of hearts in this country, we need more hospitals, cardiologists, and surgeons who are willing to look for recovery first. Transplant should always be a last resort and not a first option. I believe that every LVAD patient should be looked at first as bridge to recovery. And after that avenue is completely exhausted, then they should move on to the other options of bridge to transplant or bridge to destination therapy. Since doing all this research, I've also made it kind of an obsession of mine to seek out people who have actually had a heart recovery after VAD. I'm currently up to 47 people that I have personally contacted who have had an explant. 7 of those people are little kids like my son, whose doctors gave them little to no hope of recovery and encouraged their parents to list them for transplant. But every one of those 7 kids did recover, and they were successfully explanted, and they are doing very well and thriving today. Think about that. That's 7 hearts that were then available to other children on the transplant list because those 7 hearts were saved. Little Doug is truly living his best life on the LVAD. He has an amazing quality of life, and we're so thankful for this technology and the doctors that saved his life.
It goes higher!
We believe little Doug's heart can recover, and we believe it is already recovering. We are currently trying 2 newer therapies that have shown some real promise in accelerating recovery in LVAD patients. Now all we need is a team of doctors who are willing to fight for our son's heart alongside of us. If you knew little Doug, you would know his heart is worth fighting for.